This broadcast of In Focus is being made possible through the support of Reed Health. Reed Health, right beside you. And by First Bank Richmond, with 8 locations serving Wayne County. First Bank Richmond and you, doing great things together.
Good evening. I'm Eric VanVleet, your guest host for In Focus, your WGTV public programming. And we've got a great program for the audience tonight. 2 of my favorite topics, kids and football. And to share this topic with me is an old classmate, teammate, and friend, Steve Helmich. And Steve's got roots to Richmond. And Steve, in order for you to provide your bona fides so the audience can see why you're here and the topic that we're going to enjoy, you might give us a little bit about your history, what grew up here, etc.
Well, it's great to be with you, Eric, and I'm anxious to talk about Richmond High School football, something that's obviously very close to both of us. Grew up in Richmond, Indiana. This is my hometown, and interestingly came back a couple of times after high school. Graduated from Richmond High School, went to Indiana University, played football down there. We did not have leather helmets. My daughters are of the opinion that it was such an ancient game in those days that we had leather helmets. And then I was a teacher and a coach, and actually came back to Richmond for a couple of years to coach with our coach, Coach Etchison, on the Richmond High School staff.
I forgot about that.
And that really led to me being able to get, at a very, very young age, the football job at West Lafayette High School. I followed a guy, Gordon Straley, who was there 33 years, Football Hall of Fame. And so it was a real honor to get selected, especially when I was really pretty young at that time. Then I finished my high school coaching career at Noblesville High School in Hamilton County on the north side of Indianapolis. And then I came back to Richmond, and I had a couple of jobs in Richmond. I was the executive director for the YMCA, and then pretty quickly was offered the opportunity to be the president of the Chamber of Commerce here. Did that for a while, went to Columbus, Indiana, as the head of the Chamber and the Economic Development Board in Columbus, Indiana. And it was there that I got into in touch with a gentleman who had come from Indianapolis. He had a background at Cathedral High School on the northeast side of Indianapolis. He said, "You ought to be the president at Cathedral High School." I said, "Father Clem, I couldn't even tell you what a high school president would do," and but I learned, and I spent 17 years as the president at Cathedral High School, and it was a great, great experience. 17 years is a pretty long run in the high school.
It certainly is in a board-driven environment.
Board-driven environment where you've got parents, in our case, that were paying tuition, pretty significant tuition. So it was 17 wonderful years. I determined it was time for a new face. And most recently, I took the job as the first president for the Indiana High School Athletic Association Foundation, located in Indianapolis. So it's good to be back in Richmond.
Good. Well, I hope that gives an audience a texture of what you've been doing and your ties back to the community, because some time ago I got a call from you and you said, Fleet, and you always called me Fleet,
Yep.
We've got something to celebrate. And you said the greatest Indiana high school team
Ever assembled.
And I actually had to stop and think, what is he talking about? And then it dawned on me, it's our team. In '67, we were the mythical state champs.
Yeah, yeah.
So I'm going to ask for audience participation at this point, and the cameraman and the crew here. And I want everybody to close their eyes while I count to 3, and then open them, and I'm going to start. So everybody close your eyes. 1, 2, 3. When you open them, you're going to see 2 18-year-olds in front of you. I'm 18 years old, wore jersey 81. My weight was about 180 pounds. I just completed one of the most fantastic football seasons in my career, totally unexpected. We were mythical state champs.
Yeah.
I was all-state.
Yep.
I had a full head of hair. I was coiled steel. And from
That's
there,
certainly the way I remember it. Coiled
you
steel.
remember that.
That's exactly the way I would have
So,
described
Steve, that was me. Now it's your turn.
Well, I was number 50. I played center on that team. Like you, pretty unexpected. I think Coach Etchison kept us somehow always guessing as to whether we were really any good or not. And yeah, so we went through the entire season not really living, as though we were something very special at that point in time. I'm not sure I would describe myself as coiled steel. I was much firmer then than I am today. You and I had talked about our letter jackets. I could get my letter jacket on, but it didn't fit, I don't think, quite as well. I assumed that it shrunk dramatically over the last few years. But
It tends to do that
because I
with
played
time.
about 205, 210
Yep.
in high school, and that was a pretty decent size in those days. Obviously very different today. But yeah, we played 10 games. We won 10 games in pretty dominating fashion, and to this day, one of the great memories that I have as a guy who's starting to pile the years on just a little bit.
And I'm really glad you called me to celebrate that, because it needs to be celebrated.
Yeah.
And to that end, if we can put in a little commercial, Steve and I are going to try and put together a reunion.
Yep.
September 15th at the homecoming game at Leibold Field. I'm going to send out save the date cards to team members. I've been in touch with the RHS alumni office, try to get names, addresses, and see if we can't assemble the old crew and get us all back together again one last time, because the father time is ticking, and if we're going to do it, we need to do it now, and 50 years is the time to celebrate that.
Well, you sent me the list, the roster, to look at relative to names and addresses, and it was a bit sad for both of us to realize that at least a few of our teammates, most of the coaches are no longer with us. From that very special year. So yeah, we're gonna see if we can round up a crew and have dinner together, go watch a football game. If we can hobble onto the field, I think they should introduce us to the community, and then I suspect we'll go someplace after the game, and we'll tell a lot of lies.
Probably a nursing home or
probably a
something
nursing
like that,
home.
but-
Yeah, it could be a nursing home. Yeah.
So, and thinking back to that team, and you were absolutely correct, Hub Etchison, who is just a fantastic coach and is in the Indiana Football Hall of Fame,
deservedly
kept
so.
us humble. I had no idea. I didn't even think we were very good, and Hub quite often told us that. Very often. And I remember we opened with the Jamboree, and we lost it.
Oh, we lost the Jamboree?
And I had an ignoble moment. I was in the end zone, got a pass thrown to me wide open, hit my chest and bounced off about 5 feet and landed on the ground. That was the start of my senior year as my split end duties. Fortunately, after that, I didn't miss a whole lot of passes. But
you got to be pretty adept,
But I remember we were really a surprise, and I had no idea we were that good.
No, I think that, as I shared with you, I always speculated, especially after I coached with him for a couple of years as an assistant, and of course allowed him to be the tutor and mentor that he always was for me. I'm convinced that he rigged that Jamboree so that we didn't come out of there thinking that we were particularly good, because if you remember, the next week in practice was unbelievably difficult and challenging as we got ready for the first game. So yeah, it was you and I kid about this. I tell folks it was the greatest high school team ever assembled. That's obviously just having a lot of fun with it, but we were pretty darn good. We averaged
really
almost 40 points a game, and we gave up 18 points, 6 points in 3 different games two Ohio schools who were very good that we played, Dayton Chaminade and Cincinnati St. Xavier, and we allowed Hammond Bishop Knoll to run back a kickoff on us, but no other Indiana team scored against us that year. So if I were going to get into a debate with others who played at Richmond High School or played at other schools, I think we got some pretty good ammunition to suggest that we were pretty good.
And back then, they had great teams. I can remember as a middle schooler standing at the fence, and that place was packed both ends.
Yeah.
And I believe it was for us as well.
It was.
The end zones just packed around there. And that was what you did in the community in those days.
Yeah.
Went to the football games or the basketball games.
Absolutely. And we'll hope Coach Abe can bring some of that excitement back for Richmond High School football, because it's been a wonderfully important part of Richmond, Indiana. You know, we've got pros who played here. We've had some great coaches who have coached here, so we'll do all we can to encourage Coach Abe in his efforts to really build a very special program in a place that's had a special program for a long time.
I don't know if I need to tell everybody to close their eyes and I count to 3 so you can see us back as two 67-year-olds. I suspicion they never made the transition to the 18-year-olds and the whole coil steel and full head of hair thing.
Yeah,
but here we are.
Here we are.
And before we move off of that subject of the 67 mythical state championship football team, what was your fondest memory of that team?
Well, you know, Richmond has always been a pretty diverse community, socioeconomically, certainly, racially, ethnically. I just remember the bond. As you remember, the seniors had their own locker space up to the front, and sort of an honor to be there. You had your own showers back in the day at Civic Hall, and I just so vividly remember how closely connected all of us were on that team. There was just something very special about that season and our teammates and the loyalty that we had to one another. You know, we started to get it that we were winning games and we were going to be pretty good, you know, although we weren't allowed to acknowledge that too much. But I just remember that. I remember the ride home. Where did we play our last game? Maybe
Marion.
At Marion. And I can remember driving back into town. People were lining the streets. Remember, we went to Civic Hall, and the gym was filled with fans to recognize. So that obviously was a very special event. But it was just one of those magical kinds of experiences that not everyone gets to experience.
You know, and I think in both our lives we'd agree it was an inflection point for what happened for the rest of our lives. I know you went on to IU.
Yeah.
I went into Miami University. I played football down there under Bo Schembechler.
Yeah.
Got my
I played
knee
at IU
ripped
under
out.
I played at IU under Coach John Pont.
Yeah, both famous people.
Both famous, Miami bred, both of them. And I think I could tell people honestly, I've been very fortunate in my life. I've had jobs I've loved doing. Got to be a head coach. I got to be a president of Chambers of Commerce. I got to be the president of Cathedral. I don't think I would have been able to do those things if not for my high school athletic experience. You've been very successful in your business career here in East Central Indiana. I suspect you attribute a lot of that to the discipline,
Absolutely.
The experiences, the life experiences that you had in wrestling for you and in football.
You know, and that's a great segue when we bring Coach Abe, the new varsity head football coach here.
Yep.
But the impact that a game and football in this particular instance has on kids and kids' lives, and I so much want that for my grandkids.
Yep.
My son had it, played at UD, team captain, loved it. We worked together.
Yep.
He's fantastic in the business. I have a hard time keeping up with him.
Yeah.
Football can teach so many good lessons in corporate America in terms of team and working together.
Well, sports can teach great lessons. My oldest daughter ran cross country and track in college. My next oldest daughter was a terrific swimmer, and they learned lessons there as well. So for both boys and girls, I'm not sure it makes much difference what sport it is. I think there are huge lessons to be learned, and I'm not cynical about the world that we're raising these young people in, but I'm concerned. And I think high school athletics is still a place that provides hope for me, that if we can get a lot of young people in athletics in well-run programs, I think that they're going to learn lessons and become good young adults and eventually good adults and leaders in our community.
In order to keep myself out of trouble with my family, I want to say my daughter is a very successful cross-country runner, team captain, earned a scholarship at University of Evansville. I always get in trouble for talking about Brad and not Shannon. Shannon, forgive me.
Yeah.
You were great. And both my kids' pictures are up in Civic Hall or at the Tiernan Center now as all-state performers, Brad and Shannon, and then our mythical state championship teams there. So my grandson goes over and we can point all those pictures out.
Yeah, we had a Cathedral basketball team. I don't know if it's boys or girls, played in the Tiernan Center, and a lot of students from Cathedral came to Richmond for the game, and someone had given them the heads up, well, you need to go find Mr. Helmich's team picture, and you and I are prominent in the front row of that, and we don't look like we look today. We'd like to think that we do.
Steve, I am coiled steel with a full head of hair. You got to remember that.
But they had, the kids at Cathedral had a lot of fun. First of all, they were impressed because it says state champion, but then they did have some fun with my hair and, you know, lack of wrinkles and all those kinds of things.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, you know, you've had a great experience at Cathedral. Now, I've been a long admirer at Cathedral High School in terms of the athletic success they've enjoyed in the programs, football in particular, wrestling, which my son and I both wrestled.
Yeah.
And
Girls
it's really
volleyball,
interesting to me because you've been with probably the best of the best in terms of athletic programs. And what do you see as the secret to success in all that?
Yeah. Well, I think that the thing that always first comes to mind for me is that when kids would join a program, girls volleyball, football, basketball, whatever the sport might be, there was a part of the culture that suggested that the expectations are going to be very high. And that was true for our school. Academically, we had a great theater program, have a great theater program, the school does, a great band. So when you walked onto the campus, you almost inherited this understanding that much is going to be expected of you. I think that great coaching is a critical part of it. We did not have a highly successful program that didn't have an extraordinary coach. And those coaches need support. They need the resources that are necessary. We believed deeply that, because 85% of the kids at Cathedral play an IHSA or a club sport. A club sport could be boys volleyball, lacrosse, rugby, hockey, but 85% of every kid who came to Cathedral participated in a sport. And we believed it was just a huge opportunity to layer on experiences in their lives. So I would say that it's a culture of high expectations. It's having coaches who can attract young people to the program, who are obviously very knowledgeable in coaching the sport that they're coaching, and getting great support from the administration, from the community, so that if the coach needs a blocking sled, we don't sit around for weeks and weeks and weeks trying to figure out how we're going to make that happen. If it's not in the school's budget, I can make a call and ensure that we have the things that our very, very successful coach is going to need. And it just, success breeds success. I remember early in my Cathedral experience, probably 18 months in, a group of gentlemen came to my office. I thought they wanted to talk about the school generally. It was very specific. They thought that I was going to diminish the success of Cathedral athletics because all they heard me talk about was academics. Well, 23 or 24, 25 state championships later, I was able to convince them that you can have it all. You can have high academics, you can have young people of character and quality, and you can win a lot of state championships.
And give us a little bit about the football history, because I go over to the state finals. It's kind of been a family tradition, and Cathedral's over there all the time. It's always Cathedral, playing at Lucas Oil.
Yeah, well,
it's fantastic.
It's a great history. It's the winningest program in the state of Indiana. Cathedral High School has won more football games than any other high school in the state. It goes way, way back to its inception when they first started to play football. There were tough kids who came to Cathedral. It was all boys school originally, and there were tough kids, ethnic backgrounds, Polish and German and Lithuanian and Italian, who all congregated at the school, and they were tough kids, and they worked really hard, so they began to win. And then there was a legendary coach who came along by the name of Joe Deslin, and he was known as Papa Joe Deslin. Always had a red coach's cap on. Cathedral's colors aren't red, but it became sort of a symbol. And he formed this culture specifically in the football program. And then over all the time I was there, we had two coaches, a coach who was there for a number of years who left to go to North Central High School. I was able to convince him to come back eventually to Cathedral. The coach in between was also outstanding, a Cathedral football player historically. He was a University of Dayton All-American. Jim O'Hara, you might remember that name.
Sure.
Longtime coach at Cathedral. You know, it's just, it's in the bones of the place that football is going to be a way that we can make a statement about how many kids want to come out and be a part of it, how many kids are willing to stick with it for 4 years, how many kids who don't get a start feel as good about their experience as the kid who makes All-State and gets to go to Yale or to Vanderbilt or wherever they go to play. But I still go back to say that it's high expectations, a great coach, and enough resources for you to do it, because it's competitive today. High school football is a very competitive year-round. Things trickle down from the colleges and the pros, and you know, we need to make sure that Coach Abe, for example, has the tools that he needs to be successful.
Yeah, and that's one of the questions in terms of many of those things you mentioned. Could they be found here in Richmond? Are they transferable skills, attributes? Because you obviously have some advantages over there in Cathedral that some public high schools don't have.
Yeah, oh, no doubt that, and you look at Indianapolis, take a look at who's winning all the state championships largely in football, certainly 2A, 3A, 4A, 5A, 6A, some years 3, 4, 5, and 6. Some years they're metropolitan, they're Indianapolis metropolitan donut township schools. Big commitment to football, camps, year-round, big staffs, pretty sophisticated operations, and just a real focus. The Colts have had a very, very significant
Really?
influence.
I wouldn't have thought that.
Yeah, in central Indiana. And really, they'd like it to be across the state, but it's obviously much easier in central Indiana. Players visible, trips to the to Lucas Oil to practice, not in preparation for the state finals, just to practice on that field. Some kids will never have that experience. To go to the Colts complex, meet a lot of players, see their weight room, hear them talk. Those are pretty powerful experiences for kids. And I think you shared with me that Coach Abe took some young people to Miami of Ohio. I think those things are very powerful. And we're learning in the work that I'm doing today that high school athletes in their own right can be big influences on younger people, middle school and grade school kids.
And let's talk about what you're doing today. You're president of the IHSAA Foundation?
Yes. Yes.
So again, still related to athletics, and I can see roots back to Cathedral and football and all. So tell us what you're doing now.
Well, most people would know the Indiana High School Athletic Association as the organization that governs all high school athletics in the state of Indiana. Putting together tournaments is a major part of what they do, but they're also responsible for making sure that the rules are enforced. They'll get involved in things about transfer decisions and eligibility, and they've been doing that for a long time. Very good organization, very well-run organization. The commissioner, his name is Bobby Cox, some people may be familiar with that name, had an idea about a year ago that there were some things that he thought we could do in high school athletics topics that probably don't get done through the association, through the IHSAA, because of their governance role, their rule-making role in the state. And sometimes not everybody's ecstatic about a decision that the IHSA makes. So he said, why don't we have a foundation? And that foundation would do two things. Identify a group of programs that we would make available to high schools across the state. There are 410 member schools of the IHSA across the state, and there are about 160,000 young men and women, different young men and women, who participate in sports each year. And most high schools compete in about 17, 18 sports. There are 21 sports, but not everyone has a swimming pool, or not everyone competes in gymnastics or something. But most high schools are in 18, 19. So think about that. 410 schools, 21 sports potentially, 160,000 young people. And we know these young people, if they're in a good program, they're learning a lot of important lessons already. And the question was asked, could we invest some money, and programming that offered to schools and to the student athletes could even raise the experience, the quality of the experience that young people are having? And the answer was yes. And so last November we got started. And I'm the first president of that IHSA Foundation. So my job is quite simply to raise enough money to implement the programs that we think could positively impact the kids, or their athletic program, or the coaches who coach them.
And didn't you say that there's a connection to the Richmond High School here?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I came over to meet with Principal Ray Wolpe. Was one of my first stops to share the programs that we thought might be a fit. And she was very helpful in assisting me in really trying to figure out where are the programs, what are the programs that are fit, what programs might have a real positive impact. And Richmond High School and the North Central Conference are the pilot schools for the student leadership program. It's called Habitudes for Athletes. It's supported by an organization called Growing Leaders out of Atlanta, Georgia. And Indiana is the first state where our objective will be to make this available to every high school in the state of Indiana. So we've been in discussions with Richmond High School, and it'll be fun to talk with Coach Abe about this for a minute, because that student leadership program will be the first offering, and all 10 schools of the NCC have signed on. So they were all at our offices in Indianapolis May 12th, and they'll be back in July for 2 days of training, and then they'll be prepared for the 17 and 18 school year to implement the student leadership program. We're really excited about that.
Yeah, that's neat that Richmond's in on that pilot project. I like that.
Well, I grew up here.
You had a little influence in that?
I have a little influence, and we just thought that the North Central Conference would be a great pilot for us in terms of the size of the schools, the breadth of schools from Richmond over to the Lafayette area and schools in between. So, yeah, we'll get started in earnest with that program through the North Central Conference's participation in 2017 and 18.
Great.
Yeah.
Great. Speak to me about football participation, because somebody was just sharing with me that in the state of Indiana it's down about 8% in terms of high school football.
Yeah.
So it's declining, which wouldn't surprise me given what we've seen with concussion scares, and perhaps generations aren't as embracing of the physical difficulties that occur when you play football. I mean, it's hard.
Yeah.
You get hurt, you get hit.
Well, I see the statistics. I think that one needs to be really careful in analyzing and assessing all that. Do I think that some moms and dads with young kids have expressed a concern about a concussion issue? I think that's true. But I think that it's probably safer to play the game today than it's ever been. You and I probably had 3 or 4 concussions and didn't miss a play. Remember our helmets? They were that web designed helmet, suspension helmet. The coaching techniques are much better today in terms of how the game is played. I also think there are some socioeconomic reasons why some schools are seeing fewer kids you know, many sports are year-round in nature, and camps and off-season conditioning and going to specialty practices to help you with your foot speed or your catching of a football or whatever. You know, I think we need to look at demographics, how many kids are actually coming through the system. It was pretty flat in terms of how many kids were 8th graders matriculating to high school for a period of time. So I think we're going to see more kids playing football. And I think other sports as well, because I think we're going to be able to make the case that there aren't many places where you can put your child. And again, we want the program to be really good. We want them to be well coached, safely coached. We want them to be a holistic coach so that they're not just abusing kids trying to win a game, that every kid will benefit by their experience. But I think parents are getting it. Our kids don't have all the grit today that we'd like them to have. They don't have the resilience we'd like them to have. You know, you read a lot, I read a lot, we see the data, we see what's happening, you know, with 27, 28-year-old people who can't break away from their mother and father to take a good job in Chicago from Richmond or Indianapolis because they just don't know how to live their life yet. I think sports is, I don't think it's the last bastion. I don't want to say that because I think a good band program or a good theater program with discipline and high expectations could teach the same thing. But there aren't many places you can go where you get knocked down, get back up, where you don't win all the time, where it's hard. We need our young people to know it's hard, it's challenging, it's difficult. So I don't worry about those numbers too much. If we tell the story of the safety of the sport and increasingly all sports and the value. If I had a son, I have all daughters, but if I had a son and he came to me and said he wanted to play football, I would say, however I can help you be as successful as you want to be, I will do that, because I know for me, just like you wouldn't be the president and the owner of your company if not for your high school athletic experience.
No, that's very
I wouldn't
true.
have been president, you know, at every place I've worked if not for my athletic experience. So I think it's a great bastion. They're learning great lessons already. We hope the foundation can add some other kinds of value to that as well.
I want to confess to you that one of our good friends, Jim Carter, went out for football. We talked him into playing, and you mentioned we had the suspension helmets.
Yep.
And I remember in the first week, Jim's helmet didn't fit very well. It was too tight. I said, Jim, I can fix that for you. So I got a razor blade, and I cut through the straps. Didn't really think it through, so the second week, Jim's head is banging around in his helmet like a BB in a tomato can. And he had black and blue marks all over the top of his head. I don't think he ever forgave me. And
no, that probably explains some of Jim's behavior later in life. Of course, my wife says the same thing. She is glad to know all this research about concussion. She said, I finally have an explanation for your behavior for the 44 years that we've been married. So, but you know, the game has changed so much, and again, in my view, it's so much safer today than it was when we played. The lessons learned are still the lessons learned, but I think about how much better in condition these young people are, the lifting of weights, the year-round conditioning. So I think it's a safer game. It's a wonderful game for young men who want to play it.
I agree with you.
But again, I thought that cross-country and track was great for Carrie. I thought that swimming was great for Amy.
And cross-country for Shannon.
And cross-country for Shannon. See, you won't get in trouble.
Yeah.
Now that'll be the first thing you'll hear from her. So, yeah, but you know, when I think about Richmond football and, you know, this prospect of a new coach, a young coach who I hear has made a great first impression in Richmond, I would really encourage him to learn a lot about this history and to build on that history because there was a time Richmond was one of the legendary programs in the state of Indiana.
Well, speaking of Coach Abe, he's about to join us, so I think we're going to take a break, and I hope the audience will stay with us in the second half of this show because he's really got a great story about how he got into coaching.
Yeah.
Very interesting fellow, and I'm excited to have him here as a guest. And Steve, jump right in there and talk to Abe.
Well, we'll pepper him a bit here and see if we can't
Let's get the coach out here. I hope he's wearing a football helmet and pads.
Okay.
And we'll take
Yeah,
a break
okay.
for a couple of minutes. Thank you.
Hi, I'm registered dietitian Jennifer Stockler.
And I'm Chef Dugan Wetzel.
We are the hosts of iHeart Cooking. Please join us this month as we talk about making omega changes very quick and easy. It's great if you're doing, especially looking at a meal for 30 minutes or less. These two recipes you can easily do.
Join us Monday nights at 9:30 on WETV Channel 20.
I'm Al Bledsoe.
And I'm Ron Chappelle, and we are co-hosts for Proudly We Serve, a program for and about veterans. On our next program, we're going to have Mr. Joe Frank, Alliance for Strategic Growth Workforce Development, programs to help veterans.
Proudly We Served, underwritten by Premier Toyota of Richmond and First Bank Richmond, airs Monday nights at 8 p.m. on WETV, Channel 20.
Hi, I'm Sherry Harlan, program host for Read Beside You. Please join us for our next episode with Jennifer Stockler, registered dietitian from Reed Health, and Chef Dugan Wetzel, executive chef at Reed Health, as we discuss our healthy cooking, our Cook Well in 30 Minutes, and the iHeart Cooking Show. Watch Read Beside You on Thursdays at 8 o'clock on WETV Channel 20.
Thank you for rejoining us, and our topic today is football and kids, and to share that with us is our newly minted RHS varsity football coach, Abe Tawfeek, and you're known as Coach Abe.
Coach Abe.
Welcome, Coach. Great
Thanks
to have
for
you
having
with
me.
us.
It's a pleasure's all mine.
I heard you speak at RHS, and I loved your story, and I thought you might share that with us about how you got into coaching, what you were doing, because you've got some background. You played at Earlham.
Yes, sir.
You played at Indianapolis. So go ahead and unwind that for us, because it's a great story.
Yeah, so after I graduated high school, kind of went to some different schools. I started out at Indiana State, and then my father passed away, so I moved back home, stayed with family, enrolled at University of Indianapolis. Things didn't really work out for me there. I was still kind of dealing with the emotional aspect of my father passing away. Sat out of school for a year. Ended up at Earlham. Graduated from Earlham in 2005 with a business and nonprofit management degree. From there, I went on to work for Verizon for a couple of years, and then worked at BlackBerry for roughly 8 years.
And that's a part of the story I like. I mean, you get out in the job market, probably had no idea you're going to be a coach.
Yep.
Tooling along in your career in the for-profit world.
Yep.
Never thinking you're going to be back on the gridiron. And go ahead.
And in December of 2013, BlackBerry laid all the field employees off. And so I was sitting there with no job. Got a call from a guy who gave me my start in coaching. Coached for a couple of years after I graduated as a volunteer coach. And so the guy who gave me my start, he had just gotten this head coaching position and called me at the right time, said, "Hey, I need a few good men. Are you interested?" I said, "Absolutely." Went over and started coaching with him. While I was coaching with him, I applied for about 50 jobs, and not one callback during that entire period. That was about 3 or 4 months went past, and I was on the internet one day, and I said, you know what, I got a business and nonprofit management degree. Let me see if I can find a nonprofit job. Started searching on the internet, found the Indianapolis Teaching Fellows, and it just so happened that the application for that program was due the day that I found the website. So I literally had to sit there and fill out the application right there. And it was a long application. I had to apply for Marion University, call all 3 schools, get all my transcripts sent to those guys, and 2 weeks later I get a phone call. 2 weeks after that I get an interview. Make a long story short, I get into the program and went through the pre-service training, which is like a 6-week really intensive course that you teach summer school. At the end of that, I was voted the biggest champion for kids, which is like the MVP award that they give to the to all the people that make it out of the program. And from there, my first job ended up being at the high school I graduated from.
And we might cue up a picture of the coach. We went into Facebook. I hope you don't mind.
No, I don't mind at all.
Grab some pictures, but
Yeah.
I wanted to show you were 150 pounds of co-ed steel.
You remember that one?
Chiseled. Look at that jaw.
and then if we have another one at Earlham, because we talked about you finished your career up at Earlham.
Yes, I did. Yes,
and you
I
got
did.
4 robust-looking young men.
Oh
there
yeah.
at Earlham.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Those were a couple of my buddies there from Indianapolis. That was like the Indianapolis crew. So all of us were on defense too. It was a pretty good deal. But yeah, I was a strong safety, 185 pounds. That year I finished first on my team. I was the defensive most valuable player. And then my senior year, I ended up making the all-conference team.
Well, good,
Yeah,
great.
so I did
So
very well.
I love the story. You go into Northwest Inner City Public School, and I think I remember you saying you looked at the football budget and had 57 cents in it.
57 cents in the football account.
And they were 0-10 the year before?
They were 0-10 the year prior, and they
you
had
walk in newly minted, never coached before, with 57 cents and hadn't won a game in a year.
hadn't won a game in a year. And to make it even worse, they were the last ranked football program in the entire state of Indiana. And they had went 10 straight seasons without a winning season. One of those years, they won 3 games. The rest of them, it was 1-9, 2-8, 0-10, 10 straight years, dating all the way back to 2005. And so my first year as the head coach, you know, we did some very good things and ended up going 5-4 in the regular season, had the first winning regular season in 10 years.
Which is incredible right out of the gate. I mean, I find that almost like winning the state championship.
It was a big blessing for our school. You know, it kind of turned everything around for us. You know, it started changing the culture of the school building, and we did some great things. And started out that first year with 25 players, 25 eligible football players. The next year we ended up having roughly 50, and then we had 60 last year. You know, and so on top of that, I was voted the 2015 All-City Coach of the Year. My first year as the head coach, turning the program around, and we had another, one of my players was selected as the All-City Offensive Player of the Year that year. So, you know, it all started with the focus in the weight room and the classroom. I knew that, you know, if we focused in those 2 particular areas, we would have success on the field. And so that's been the focus so far here in Richmond as well.
How did we get you away from that high school? Why Richmond? What brought you over to Richmond?
Well, you know, the athletic director, Frank Carr, was the guy who recruited me to come play football at Earlham. And yeah, when Coach Oliva stepped down in January, he gave me a call, asked was I interested in applying for the job, and it was a tough decision to make, you know, to come from the high school that I graduated from, and I mean, I put in a lot of hard work to turn that program around. But Richmond, the bones of Richmond were just something that I think is very rare today in high school football, to have one high school in the entire city, you know, 1 little league, 3 middle schools. So I really have a chance to build the football program from the youth league all the way up through the high school. And that was a big attraction to me, along with the facilities, fantastic facilities. You know, 57 cents in the football account over there at Northwest. We got 5 footballs per year, you know, and that was 1 for each home game. And so actually, if we didn't have 5 home games, I only got 4 footballs. You know,
I won't share with you Coach Strife's football budget at Cathedral High School for the last few years, because it's more than 57 cents.
I'm sure. I'm sure. You know, Coach Strife, phenomenal coach. One of the guys I really look up to. That football program is amazing. You know, that's what we're going to strive to make Richmond. You know.
Now, and I brought a newspaper article in. The Palladium did a nice job covering you. And I got to ask you about Code Red. You know, when I was over at the high school, I heard Code Red. I didn't know if the fire alarm was going on. We should look for exits. But you talked about Code Red. I thought that was kind of cool. So you might tell us about Code Red.
Yeah, so Code Red, it's kind of it's a double entendre. And what that means, it's got a double meaning. And so for us, it was the fire alarm. It's the fire alarm to the state of Indiana. Richmond football is back and we're coming. All right, that's the first part of it. The second part of it is there's two pieces. It's the code that we're going to live by with the football players. Number one is protect the program, and number two is honor the brotherhood. And so that's something we're preaching with the kids on a daily basis. Protect the program just means doing the right things at all time, in the classroom, out of the classroom. Once you're a part of our football program, the people in the community know that you're a part of our football program, and we want to represent this community with the highest standard possible. And then honor the brotherhood. We're a family, and I really preach that with the football players. So it's always about lifting each other up instead of pulling each other down.
Coach, you made a really important point about the impact that in this case, a really successful, well-run football program can have on a school. You probably know Bill Peebles, who was at Southport High School. He subsequently went to Lawrence Central. But when I went to Cathedral a number of years ago, Bill was an assistant coach at Cathedral High School. And I lived on the south side of Indianapolis. The impact that he and the football program had on the Southport community was unbelievable. I told him, I said, if you want to run for mayor of Southport right now, now's the time to do it, because you would win in a landslide. But because they had not had success at Southport, and the school was a bit divided, and there were issues within the school. And he, through the football program, was able to make a dramatic change in what it was like to be a student at Southport High School. So, you know, I think you have that opportunity here at Richmond.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, just to touch on Northwest, when I took over the football program, the school was an F-rated school. Graduation rates were really, really low. Put a focus on the academics with the football players and expected them to be the leaders in the building. And in 2 short years, you know, obviously the principal there, Michelle Britton-Watts, has done a fantastic job. And she was the main person. She's the leader in it all, but I played a part. And we were able to take the school from an F to a C in 2 short years. And so, you know, we saw the impact that, you know, a football program and athletics in general can make on a school and an entire community. And that's what we plan to do here in Richmond.
Well, we wish you the very best. We played on the greatest high school
Here
team
we
ever
go
assembled.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I'm just kidding.
No, 1967 mythical champions. Hey, we've got big shoes to fill.
Have you gone into Tiernan Center? Yeah, we're having our 50th celebration. But you've gone in and sort of worshipped before the team picture.
Every day we pray before those.
There you go.
You're a good man. I'm glad we hired you.
Yeah, he's a good man.
Well, tell us about your academic standards, because, again, my grandson's on the spring football team.
Yes, sir.
So I get to hear stories from him, and it's great. But I remember something about bear crawls the whole length of the field if your grades aren't where they need to be.
Oh, yeah. So, you know, what we try to do is we try to be an extension of the home. And we hope that the home is an extension of the football program. And so my expectation for the kids is that you can't have any grades lower than a C. And for every grade that you have lower than a C, that's 100-yard bear crawl. And so if you come and you have 2 Ds, that's 200 yards of bear crawls. And so we'll send out a grade check sheet every 2 weeks. And the kids will take it all around all their classes, have their teacher sign off on it, put their grade, any comments, behavior issues, if they're tardy to class, all of that stuff. And we sit down with the kids on an individual basis, and we talk about that. And, you know, I really put the focus on the student-athlete concept. And you're always going to be a student before you're an athlete in my football program. Being a football player at Earlham really taught me the meaning of academics and academic achievement. Football is going to end at some point. It doesn't matter if you're the greatest player in the world. It even ended for Peyton Manning. You know, and if you don't have that fallback, that education to fall back on when your athletic career is over, what are we doing? And that's my whole thing. I never got into coaching to win football games. I got into coaching to change lives, because I grew up in a really rough neighborhood, went to a really rough school, and if it wasn't for football, I may have went down the same path that some of the guys that I grew up with did. But, you know, I was blessed to be pretty good in football. I had some great coaches that put their arms around me and showed me the right path. And that's what my goal was when I got back into coaching. I wanted to show kids the right path on how to change your life and use football as a vehicle to get an education.
You know, watching you, and I remember you commented that you're a kid magnet.
Yeah.
And I see the charisma, and I hope our audience out there today can see the charisma that this young coach has. And it's what gets the numbers up.
Mm-hmm.
And I know the tremendous amount of time and energy you have to put in. For instance, you just took the 7th and 8th graders down to Miami University, I believe on a Sunday. Again, Saturday, my grandson was part of that and loved it. Talked about it, got in the locker room, met players, got an autograph. Just the coolest thing ever, you know, for this young 14-year-old kid.
Yeah.
And I know they all had that experience. To see the hours you're putting in with spring football, middle school. I mean, football's going to own you, but that's the way it's going to have to be to turn this program around.
Absolutely. And, you know, I don't even look at it as work. I have the best job in the world because I get to show up to work every day and have fun. And that's really what keeps me going. I don't look at it as work. And, you know, I suggest that everybody try to find that, you know, whatever it is that you're passionate about in life, figure out how to do it and make money so that it's not a grind. It's not a job to you. I just show up and, you know, have fun every day. And the rest takes care of itself. You know, going to Miami of Ohio, that was something that I organized with the kids. I wanted to get them out of Richmond, get them onto a college campus at a young age so that they could see what it's like, you know. And on top of that, there's a Richmond football player that plays at Miami of Ohio now, which is Nate Trawick, and was gracious enough to reach out to me on Facebook and offer to talk to the kids after the game. And so we went, took the kids, and they got to talk to Nate. And the Miami of Ohio football players and that coaching staff treated our kids so good.
That's what I heard. Gave them equipment. One is wearing size 15 shoes.
15 shoes. Our quarterbacks got a pair of shoes. They got cleats. They got gloves. They got some shorts. They got some shirts. And, you know, it was just one of those things where they just, you know, Miami of Ohio did it right. They had the community in there. It was a perfect environment, perfect setting. We got to go back into the weight room, into the locker room. The kids got to go out onto the actual football field and take pictures. And it was just an amazing time.
Yeah,
you know, great time for the kids.
Mission accomplished.
Mission
And
accomplished.
I might ask to cue up that picture. I think that's the last picture we have of the group. There they are.
Oh, yeah.
At the Miami
Took about
football
60
field.
of them out there. Great day. Great day.
Yeah, Jack was higher than a kite. It took us a while to get him back with his feet on the ground. I love that.
Oh, the kids had a great time.
So we've talked about the academics. What about other sports? Now, we've had some coaches at the high school get very possessive, and you're only going to do my sport.
Yeah.
How do you feel about other sports and participation?
I actually encourage all the kids to play sports. I think the biggest problem in sports today is sports specialization, where a kid decides really early that he's just going to be a football player, or he's just going to be a basketball player, he's just going to wrestle. I want my kids to play all the sports. Try them all. Now, if you're a guy like LeBron James, who was an all-state wide receiver in football, and then obviously one of the best basketball players in the entire country, if you get to that point where, listen, you know you're going to have a longer career in basketball versus football, focus on basketball, no problem. But if you're one of those guys that, you know, you're not getting highly recruited, you're not 6'8", 260 pounds and jumping out of the gym.
Most of us aren't.
I'm not either. You know, I was a Division III football player and proud of it. And, you know, most of the guys that we have are like that. Yep. And so I'm going to encourage them if they, you know, after football season's over, try out for basketball. If you get cut from the basketball team, go wrestle. If you don't wrestle, then when we get into the spring, you have to play baseball or run track. One of the two. That for me is non-optional. So you have to play at least one other sport. So I'm making it a requirement for our football players to play at least one other sport. And I'm going to encourage them to play 2 other sports.
Excellent. What do you see as the challenge for you in the Richmond program now? You've been here and you've looked over the bones. What are 1 or 2 challenges that you really think you have to address right off the bat?
Well, the biggest challenge that I've seen so far is the culture of the high school football program. You know, today we had 12 kids show up to workouts. You know, and on our best day, we had 28 kids show up to workouts. You know, I know that the numbers were an issue last year. I believe they had 40, 45 players on the team. And that has been the biggest challenge for me so far is, you know, trying to get those kids on board and buy into what I'm preaching, and that we're not going to win one football game by showing up in August. Every game that we win in the fall will be because of the work that we put in now and through the summer, and then all throughout the off season. And so that's been the biggest challenge for me. And what I'm happy about, what I'm really, really happy about, is the enthusiasm from the middle school kids. You know, it's just been a blessing for me to come in at this point in time to where I can go right in and start building a foundation with the middle school kids immediately, start coaching those guys up, because in a few years that's going to be the foundation of what we hang our hat on. And we've got some tremendously gifted kids in our middle school program that we really feel confident and strongly about by the time these kids get up into our high school program, and by the time they're juniors and seniors, we should be competing for a state championship.
We're getting down in the waning minutes of our interview here, but tell us what's your projected record this year at RHS Football.
You know, I think it's too early to say right now. It's too early to say.
VanVleet, that's really mean.
You know, here's one thing I will say.
You were supporting him before you asked that question.
I've never had a losing record as a head coach.
Really?
And I don't intend to start.
This is your.
So I'll say that.
I like that.
I'll say that much.
Because last year we were 4 and
6 total. 4 and 5 in the regular season. So we're going to win at least one more of those games. We're going to go 5 and 4. My goal is to compete for an NCC championship, but it's going to take commitment and buy-in from the current high school players that we have. Mm-hmm. And unless they commit and buy into what we're preaching as a coaching staff, that's going to be really tough for us to do. But if they do, I believe we have the talent in the building to do it. We have 2 kids right now that multiple Division I football coaches have reached out to me about. And we're talking IU, Purdue, Eastern Kentucky, have all been in direct contact with me about these 2 individuals. So we've got talent. How committed are they going to be?
Right.
That'll tell you how good our record's going to be.
Well, both Steve and I want to wish you the very best in your season.
Thank you.
We're impressed with your enthusiasm and the commitment and the passion you put into the game, and that's what it takes. And you've got it. You're going. I know you're going to be successful. You're going to rebuild it. And I think our audience saw that today as they watched you and heard you. So we have a reason to be excited about Richmond football, and our kids be involved in it and that character building, which is I'm so excited about my grandson just being part of something bigger than himself.
Yes.
Those lessons we want them to enjoy in this life. So,
absolutely.
And I've been away a while, but I think the community of Richmond is yearning for a first-class program. Wouldn't need to be in football, but in this particular case, that's what we're talking about. So I think people will come out and support you, and I think they'll be pleased in what you put on the field.
Well,
thank you both, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Steve, I'm going to buy you dinner. You probably have to get back to class, but thanks for coming over from India and sharing
it's been
your
great.
time.
It's been great to get back home and to be with my teammate of the greatest high school football team ever assembled, and catch up just a little bit. And I've been very anxious to meet you, Coach.
Gentlemen, we're going to wrap it up, but thank you so much.
Thank you.
Take care.
This broadcast of In Focus has been made possible through the support of Reed Health. Reed Health, right beside you. And by First Bank Richmond, with 8 locations serving Wayne County. First Bank Richmond and you, doing great things together.